Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Marie, and today I'm joined by my friend, Isabella Stephanie Hauck. Isabella is a mental health expert, leadership facilitator, sound engineer, and the founder of Intrinsic Human Dynamics. With over 15 years of experience in addiction recovery, psychiatry, crisis intervention, and trauma-informed care, she brings a unique combination of clinical expertise, systems thinking, and embodied practice to leadership, organizational development, and human transformation. Her work explores how nervous system regulation, relational intelligence, and psychological safety shape resilient leadership, healthy organizations, and collective impact. So in this conversation, we're going to explore nervous system regulation, power dynamics and breathwork, leadership, mental health, and the importance of remaining fluid and not being defined by one single identity. I'm so happy to have Isa on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Isa. So happy that you're joining me today for this conversation. We've been friends for years. Obviously, we met through the Spirit of Breath Collective, but I really love watching your journey over the years and how you don't become too over attached to any one thing you're doing. You're fully in everything that you're doing, but you're very fluid. So I think it'd be just a really nice starting point just to kind of talk about your work, because your work spans like psychiatry, addiction recovery, leadership, sound engineering, breath work. So it's a really lovely combination and super interesting. So just kicking off with talking a little bit about your journey, how you get into what you're doing. How did you land exactly where you are right now? What a big question.
First of all, super happy to be here and to speak a little bit about how I landed there. It's actually, at the moment I'm building my own company, Intrinsic Human Dynamics, and it's a systemic framework that explores how health emerges through the intersection of the nervous system, psychology, relationship, biology, organization, and culture, and as well the environment. So it's something what is a product of the way how, I was actually driving through life. I actually started very early to be interested in the psyche of the mind and in the depth of the mind. So I started to be focusing on psychiatric nursing. And actually when working there, I realized that personally, from my perspective, the system is often missing the human in the center there. And it was something that was really making something with me and with my whole experience about how we support people. Afterwards, it was actually a bit of like an intense story with my own life that I fell a bit in my own history with addiction patterns. And I didn't really know how this all appeared during this time because I was a teenager and I felt I was rebelling against a lot of things I couldn't, understand in that moment. And while that, for me, then I started actually with music, and music really helped me to, find a way back to myself, actually. And then also I started to work with people with addiction. So I stopped with my own consumption. And of course, this now sounds a bit like easy, that it came like zap. And when it was a really deep process, what already started there. But music was a big part what helped me to go out of that. And of course, the experience I had actually in then addiction rehabilitation, also to work with people. It was a huge, big part of my own history, and really work with people and really seeing them and the pain, what is actually lies behind an addiction or behind that. And also how art and music and real connection is important for our mental health. And and then it came more and more that I was diving more into the deep topics of psychology, like why do we consume, what is emotional intelligence, how it can support our relational patterns and all these things, and how our culture and our systems has to do with that. And of course, how also our biology has to do with that, and how all these complex things come together. And yes, and then at a certain point I realized, because I was making music, more DJing, and then I realized, okay, I also feel I want to go out of like this DJ scene and really need, kind of like a completely reset, because everything was still connected in an environment where I didn't felt so like, that I really could expand the way how I felt I want to or I need to stay stable. And so I stopped everything, and I stopped also with DJing for a long time. And then actually breathwork came into my life. And I was during Corona, because I was not able to make music anyway, in clubs at least. And so
I like the way you said it. You were doing Corona. It was like it was a choice,
Yes. Yes, but that was the thing that there actually I found breathwork, and breathwork was really able to support me in this journey of like transition, of really making deep work with myself. Of course, I have to say there were many things coming together. I was, of course, also talking therapy, dancing. I had also like a really nice psychologist I was working with. And yeah, so many things coming together. But for me, breathwork was really one of the most amplifiers to find back to myself and to really understand what was happening with me and where all this pain coming from. And then also during this time, I just was really late diagnosing my ADHD and understanding, okay, all these patterns and all these things coming a lot are connected with my neurodivergency. And of course, with talking with other people, I get connected over this whole path, found a lot of resonance with these topics, and that I found much more people, they are connected to neurodivergency and addiction and also system rejection and all these things. Yeah, and how much pain this can bring up in our own system and how much disbelief in ourselves can happen and develop in that way. So yeah, and then I developed more and more into actually youth health and supporting teenagers with neurodivergency on their path with sound and music, also for relaxation, and working with my big beautiful gong, what I'm super happy to have, and yeah, and also with breathwork and bodywork, and yeah, all these things then made sense. So that was a very interesting and beautiful, yeah. In the end, I'm super grateful for the whole path, even when it wasn't sometimes very dark and felt very dark. And I don't want to reduce myself to the story or to one of these labels, because it's not really how I see we should look at people, not with diagnosis or something. It's more about, I'm sharing this because I believe, or I had made the experience that it really want to, yeah, just give people the spirit and the belief back that they can shift their life and change something, and there's often not something wrong with themselves. That is often also the environment and the situation where we are in. And there are tools and friends and environments that really can help us to transform and to develop and find back in connection. And it needs to be very, of course, delicate and with a lot of responsibility. And it's important really to land with the right people, where I'm super grateful that I feel I found a community also where I felt very held and seen. And yes, so that's actually a bit of my story. Sorry for like the big circle I turned, but I feel it's all connected. And I think our history shapes also who we are. And I think we shouldn't reduce ourselves to that, but it's also part of who we are. And that's also what I think is part of recovery, or a lot of people say healing, not like suppressing the past or getting over something, like more integrating it to our life and learning from it and sharing the tools with people. And yeah.
Yeah. There's so many questions I want to ask from this, but just to kind of start what you're talking about there, I think is so important, around not getting overly attached to, yes, of course, our past is what makes us, and it's beautiful that you can see how all these different elements have brought you to this point that you're at now. But do you think that's like kind of one of the problems, not just necessarily with addiction, but about identity, and how we can sometimes become overly attached to one identity? And that might be that you're in, like you said, sometimes it's environmental, you actually find yourself in a space that's not feeding your energy and it's not working. Like, could you speak a little bit more to what you think about this?
Yes, thank you so much for that question, actually, because I think this is a really big topic, because I think we live in a society where it's very important for a systemic perspective that we choose one thing. And especially with coming from ADHD, this is not really the way how I think and how I'm working. So this is a actually existential threatening question for everyone who has ADHD, because you're interested in so many things and you always try to adjust and to like minimize yourself to one topic. And there was a long belief in myself that I thought really something is inherently wrong with me, that I'm not able to choose or not focus on just one thing. And of course, there's a lot of like, I think, wrong beliefs about what ADHD actually really is. But in the end, I think it's not just affecting people with neurodivergency, it affects everyone who wants to think more creatively and more with creativity, more open. And I think this is actually what our world desperately needs, that we are open for maybe unconventional ways of thinking or connecting things, or combining different ways of life paths that we had, and see what kind of synergy can get out of that. And when I'm looking back, I'm so happy actually that I had parents, to be honest, they were very open in this direction. So I was always supported in the different direction I wanted to go. So I think if I would have been restricted in that, I don't know if I would have been able to break that much free to choose this different paths and really switch between them so often. And actually flowing with that shows me that if we have impulses to do things, that is not always wrong. Not every impulse is wrong. Also, when we're talking about breathwork, it's often about regulation and about calming down and having a controlled mindset. And I actually would challenge that perspective also in many ways, that I think it's sometimes also good to have an intuitive, or like to distinguish an impulse, what let you maybe consume, what you maybe shouldn't. And on the other hand, to follow an impulse, what is an intuitive direction and what is important to follow, and without controlling it too much. I think there's a very delicate fine line. And I think it's really important to create spaces where we can learn that and integrate also failure culture, because this is a huge part of, I think, more free expressive directions, or more combining new things together to really be able to make mistakes and see what works, what doesn't work, and without feeling too much shame, because I think that blocks us a lot and creates a lot of self-doubt. And actually, I think even mental health crisis occurs from that sometimes, not always, but often.
Yeah, so do you mean this kind of in the way that if you're not allowing something to move, or like you're allowing things to become like overly calcified, then you're getting torn into one little pocket that you don't need to stay in? Is that sort of what you're speaking to here?
Yes, exactly. And that's okay to maybe nerd yourself. I don't know if this is an English word, but I know you. But I mean, to really get nerdy about one topic and really dive into that, and then
I like this nerd yourself. I'm going to clock this one.
Yeah. And then on the next year, you feel another topic where you really want to dive into. And that, I think, excitement and the feeling of feeling joy with what we are doing is actually, for me as a person with ADHD, I'm thriving from that. So if I'm too long in a place where I'm not feeling joy or lightness, or also kind of like playful fun, I'm really getting sick. Like, this is really something, it's really bad for my mental health, for my physical health, for my overall thrive. And I think I'm not the only one. And this is what I mean. It's not the label what gives me the permission to like do that. I think I observe this actually with many people. And that doesn't mean that structure is not important as well, and that it's not important to have like kind of a rhythm in your life. Like, that is not what I try to say. It's more having a bit more space to move and a bit more openness to go a path maybe you didn't walk before. Also to create resilience. If you fall, that you can come back, and that. Because I think this creates a natural way of resilience, as I said already, and also self-trust to be able and have the power to bring yourself back on track, as well to create completely new ways in innovation. So I think this is also, it comes together. Failure and innovation is something what for me is very connected. And
Yeah, absolutely. You have to be willing to try it and see if it's going to work, and then like know that you can keep going if that's not the pathway for you. And it's like you say, it's not about not being committed to something or not having things that are always present in your life. It's just about noticing in your body, like you said, that's not working for me. And I think that's the root of a lot of illnesses in the body, is not paying attention to, oh, this energy does not feel good, and like, what is there heaviness in my body? And that doesn't mean you don't go through times of discomfort and things like this, because even for me, and this you will know from being on the journey with me when we were studying together, is like, even doing things that I love, sometimes I was very uncomfortable doing those things, but it was a good discomfort because I knew it was like, this is growth. And so there's a different feeling between discomfort that is growth because you're doing something new that challenges you, but discomfort that is heavy and stagnant. And that is the path to sort of like listening to wisdom in your body. So I would like to chat about this a little bit more, kind of for listeners who are obviously going to be interested in breathwork and nervous system and sound and how they kind of all come together. You have brought breathwork into a few different settings. Like, you've brought it into not just a wellness retreat, but also kind of working in psychiatric hospitals and places where the suffering is very real, which requires, I would imagine, lots of different things, different approaches in terms of how it's handled, facilitation. So do you want to talk like a little bit about some of the things that you did in a psychiatric hospital and the project that you worked on. I think that would be really interesting to talk about.
Of course, of course. Yes, so first of all, I also feel this is a really beautiful direction where breathwork could land in the future, especially coming from that direction and seeing so many treatments. I wouldn't say everything in psychiatry is bad. I also really want to mention that because I think there's no black and white, and this is very important for me to say as well. Actually, I think there's a lot of powerful wisdom in there. But I think there's missing often this real connection to our heart. And I think this is a huge thing, especially on my own path, what helped me to overcome a lot of pain. And I think it was one of my biggest resources actually to come back to. And if, of course, then if we come to breathwork and in these settings, that really creates the environment for this heart connection. And I think that was one of the most powerful things what really breathwork can bring into these places, that people have a systematical tool where they can learn to connect with their heart and their sensation, and to also this gratitude. These are very simple things, but in this environment, it's something so strong and so important. And it's actually where really the transformation of the mind starts, to coming back to be grateful, to coming back to really feel yourself. Also, of course, feel maybe some pain you experienced and maybe intense pain you experienced. But in the end, I think especially bringing that in this environment, it's not just about feeling all this pain and working through all that and having this intensity. It's really more about creating safety within the body and really being allowed to feel safe and allowing ourselves to feel safe. And with the project, it's actually here in Switzerland, it's the Sanatorium Kilchberg. I started actually with a friend this breathwork sessions there. And we started with doctors and the psychiatrists and the psychotherapists. We started actually with the employees. What is, I think, now looking back, first we were like, oh, why we can't start with patients, or that would be so important. I actually feel it's especially important to start with the environment exactly in a psychiatric center, because the people who are holding the space there, they are giving this reflection of heart-centered perception of people. Am I able to really see people, to really deeply look at them and deeply listen, like not just with this whole framework, what we of course learn in university, what is important and all these different patterns and diagnosis and everything, like really this humanity. And this is something I feel breathwork is a huge supporter, especially for also psychiatrists and psychotherapists and all people that are working there, nurses and so on, to be first connected with themselves, with their own heart, with their own perception, with their own history, to understand what it means to be vulnerable also, because we often want to have people there. They say like, oh, share your story, but how hard it is to really share with someone you maybe don't even know really what happened to you, and then having trust instantly. Like this is something really difficult, and trust also is actually a huge part. I think trust is one of the most important things, especially when we talk from this very, very sensitive spaces, because lots of people have a lot of issues with trust. And also talking from myself, it took me a long, really long time, and still sometimes where I feel I have trust issues. And this is also where I realized what brought me to psychiatry, actually, in a way, because it's the own history, what you try to solve over someone else, what is actually, I think, a big shadow from healthcare systems overall. But this is why I think it was a very innovative project, or is still, because the breathwork sessions, of course, are still going on there, to work with the employees. And it was super powerful to experience, to see really the psychiatrist I'm working with. He was allowing himself to cry and to open up. And then we had afterwards this conversation together, and we're like, okay, wow, it was very intense, but beautiful. And I feel so much love. I feel so connected also to the other employees. And when you experience so much intensity in a working place, it really shifted the way how we were speaking and connecting towards each other. And of course, this had an impact on the teams, and the teams have an impact on the patients. And this effect is actually something we were not really consciously thinking about it in the beginning, but of course afterwards it makes totally sense. because the more calm and connected the people are, they're holding the space, and they're also actually, it's just a mirror from every space that gets held in people in vulnerable positions, from teenagers in school, from breathwork sessions, from
Yes.
psychiatry. Like, I think it's everywhere the same topic about responsibility, honestly, and authenticity. And this shifted also the way how we're working there. And and I'm deeply inspired about this project. I mean, of course, it's still in the beginning, but I really hope that more and more systems and responsibility are integrating this work. I did this sessions also in institutional context with the finance department in Berlin and the justice department, actually. And it's interesting. You can say, okay, what has to do the one with the other? But it has actually a lot to do with
No, I agree.
yeah, because it's a lot about actually power, people in power, or like holding a lot of power, because the psychiatry and the people working there, they're holding a lot of power about their perception about themselves, and also about their freedom, actually, because psychiatry is also allowed to close doors. It can have really a similar experience like a jail sometimes for some people. So it needs a lot of that delicate sensitivity towards humanness, and always, taking yourself and your personal experience also out of judgment, and really being always in the observer position and pro-patient and pro-human. So, and this is something what I think also in Justice Department is like a similar perspective. So you're really making rules for people in structures. So, and so I'm really happy that these spaces are opening for breathwork, and because breathwork for me brings a lot of resources to reconnect with their own self and with their own sensitivity. And I think this is very, very needed in these days.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's the opening of the heart. And I think this is so interesting what you're talking about how we all mirror each other. So like every group, whether it's a small group of a couple of people, a team, no matter what environment you're in, it's this, all these nervous systems are then one nervous system, and they're all affecting each other. And this is something very much we would experience training together when we're in this space where everybody is like, what happens when your heart is open and you are actually full trust, and that that you can trust to just be open, what happens in that space, and if you can create more pockets like this everywhere, then it's so beautiful. So I think that sort of leads us naturally on to kind of talking about power dynamics and breathwork. And I know this is something you and me have talked about before. I think it's such an important conversation. I mean, like, let's just kind of talk a little bit about breathwork and where we're at in the field at the moment and what we're seeing. And I know for me, and again, I've been really lucky, as have you been, to learn with some really, really great people, and to kind of be very, very aware of all of these kind of power dynamics that are at play, and being very careful with that responsibility. So I'd kind of like to hear your thoughts and talk about this a little bit more. Like, what sort of concerns, and both excites you, I know what excites you about breathwork and its potential, but what concerns you about how do we bring it into not just fields of psychiatry, where of course I know we both agree that it is huge potential to help there, but in general, just seeing these videos of like people leading 100 people, posting their really fragile moments on social media to like boost marketing. I mean, there's so many things that we could talk about here, but what's your thoughts on power dynamics in breathwork?
I think it's a very important topic we need to talk about more and more. I think everyone who is involved in this whole field, in this community, or is interested in this community should be felt talked to with this question. And because I think it's really a question we all need to think about, and honestly think about, and really question what is our goal, and really where we want to go with that, and what is our intention behind, and how much are we able, and I mean, really talking about a very human and natural urge sometimes for having power, for being seen. A lot of things when people in power positions, and I think leading a breathwork session is, like we shared before, it's bringing you in a way in a power position. And I think some people underestimate that it's not just you say, look, okay, I'm guiding a session and I'm a facilitator. You are guiding a session with people that are really, really vulnerable and even in an altered state. So they're sometimes not really able to maybe really have 100% perception of what is really happening. And in the first place, I have a huge responsibility. And with this responsibility comes also, I need to reflect on myself and my own power dynamics. And on the power dynamics I'm carrying within myself and within my own system. And also how they were created and what are my, how to say this, my tendencies to work with power. And I think what for me always is actually a red flag if someone says, I do not have nothing to do with power. Because this is something is for me very hard to believe, because in all the circumstances I feel every human is connected in a way to power and works with power, and everybody wants to have power in a way. And I think when we come in a power position, it's our really deep responsibility to dive into that and to ask people how they handle situations. And the better we know ourselves and be also honest and authentic to look at things we maybe would love to avoid, even about ourselves or especially about ourselves, the more dangerous it gets. So I think this is something we really have to consider. And I think also it's something how much space I really can hold, how much people really I'm able to guide. Because I think not the bigger, the better. I think that's not the goal. I think the goal always should be that I do the safest way I can, and really staying connected to my sensitivity. And I think one of the most important things is actually also learning to meet people where they are. And I think this is something what is actually really hard. And that's not that you, of course, meet every person when you have a bigger session or something that you can meet everyone directly. But in the end, what I want to say is give the power ultimately back to the people.
Yes.
Even when you start a session, the people are in power. The people choose how far they go. The people choose how deep they want to dive. The people should have the space to stop every time they want. I think a lot of people also say, okay, if you don't like what you're feeling, you can always stop also with breathing. I think this should be always something what should be considered in the beginning. Then, of course, also when we talk about body work and all these things, there comes even more responsibility, because speaking from my own history and having actually physical abuse in that, I didn't even know when I started with breathwork. Actually, all these memories came much more later on. Mm-hmm. And that actually taught me, even if someone would have given me a questionnaire to put in, did you experience kind of abuse? Do you have a trauma in that? Mm-hmm. I would have crossed no, because I didn't know. So, and that is something I want to really speak to all the breathwork facilitators. So even if people not telling you what they have, you don't know what is underneath.
Yes.
Maybe the people sometimes don't know themselves, and maybe they also don't want to know. Mm-hmm. Because
exactly, this is the maybe they don't want to know, and I think that's actually a key point in it. Somebody has to want to open the door. You know, that has to be, and that's another power dynamic on consent. Is knowing that you're not going into just like some like meditative experience, that you can be opening doors and the care that's required there.
Yes, and that's what I mean with meeting people where they are. So the goal is not to create the most intense experience. The goal is to meet the people where they are. And sometimes a person is just there to be there and have a very shallow experience. And this is something you need to 100% support and be there for this experience, even when it bores you or you feel you did something wrong. Maybe you have then this pattern coming up, or you were not good enough, like really being able to catch all these thoughts, what can come up to when holding a session, and being able to mirror yourself in these moments and bringing yourself back into your own center and saying, okay, this is my perception. This is what I think my insecurity is coming up. And this had nothing to do with the people. This has nothing to do with the people that are here in the room. And just really holding the space. And I think this is what really space holding means. And this is really something what develops, I think, because of that also, it can be a reason in this like very chaotic direction sometimes, because we live in a system, sadly, where we have a lot of boundary crossings in power dynamics. So this is why a lot of people are not even aware when I'm crossing a boundary in perception of I'm in a power position and this is not my right in a way to do, in telling people what they should do or what is the best for them. Because, yeah, really, also they're coming back to psychiatry. People know best when there is their moment to recover from addiction. You can't talk someone through that. The people need to make the choice themselves, and that's the only way how you can really recover from something. Of course, you can support it, but a person, and this is something you need to train, you don't know how much people sometimes came 10, 15 times. And of course, then you realize, I stop to believe in this person, or I get annoyed about it. And this is also something in a breathwork session to learn. Even a person comes 10 times and tells you 10 times maybe the same story. It's not your position to push or to pull, sondern to really just sit there and hold the space for that, and even redirect a person to a different setting if it's even necessary. And allowing yourself, or have the courage to also tell yourself, that's not what I can hold.
Yes.
Where is my boundary and where's my limit? Also knowing the own limits, the own boundaries, and being able to mention that in a very, of course, clear way. Also to be also reject people sometimes. Had also one situation where I had a one-on-one session and someone wanted to have this session, and I really could feel the nervous system is absolutely overstimulated, and she was coming from one session in the other and doing so many things, and she was like, I want to do that, and then really sitting there and of course really from the heart, like, sorry, but I don't feel comfortable to do this today. It's just an impulse, and I would recommend from my side to really let your nervous system a bit slow down and calm, and I wouldn't feel comfortable to do that. And if the person goes to someone else, okay, it's her responsibility, but not just doing it for the money or doing it for the ego or all these things, like and
you're
it was
doing it to
also
help somebody.
especially that, actually thinking, but it's also something questioning our urge to help. Where does it come from?
Yes.
Is it really the urge for the other person? Because to be honest, and this also in healthcare is a huge shadow, and of course a lot of people that are doing breathwork have a similar shadow, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Do I really want to help because of the other person? Do I help because I feel better? And is it for my coping mechanism to to handle my own insecurity, maybe, in a way? And that's something it's really important, and I feel we're going so deep and we have so much power in these sessions to bring up these very deep things. And I think the restrictions of who can be a breathwork facilitator, who should hold these spaces, I think it's something I see in the future, hopefully developing in a way a bit more, because I think it's really not to underestimate also when it comes to physical touch.
Yes.
And all these things. Even when I'm, of course, a huge friend for innovation and integrating that, but I think we're just able to integrate it systemically if we are as careful as possible to do it in a responsible way, that we not crash the whole movement.
Yeah.
And I think this is also something very important.
And I think let's just chat about this a little bit more in terms of body work. And like for me, I'm very, very careful with body work. I tend to do it more on if it's a one-to-one setting, and I'm like feel very dialed in on like most importantly somebody being able to express their boundary, because I think this is one of the things that can come up in a group session is, you can say, it's completely fine to not receive body work. Would you like to? You can do the very clear communication, but there's again a power dynamic in a group setting, right? So in that group setting, you might have somebody who's like, oh well, everybody else is going to receive it, so maybe I will. I don't want to. There's all these different things at play, and of course, not everybody thinks like that. Somebody might be, that's totally fine. I don't want to receive it. So there's a certain confidence as well in that setting to say like, no, I want to be in my own space. Me personally, during a breathwork session, I like to be in my own space. Absolutely. Because you don't know where you're going. And it's like you say, you don't know where you're going. And sometimes it's really gentle, meditative experience, and suddenly you can find yourself in a completely different state. And at the beginning of the session, you might have said, yes, I'm fine, I would like to receive body work, and then not be there. So let's kind of chat into that a wee bit, because you were part of the facilitation team for the Humboldt University. Do you want to kind of like talk a little bit kind of what sort of experience in the study or anything that sort of surprised you in regards to your journey of learning about body work and how things are received?
Yes, I think we had there a really beautiful way how we were working there in terms of body work. And of course, there are some different perspectives on that. But I would definitely place myself on the same direction as you mentioned. And I think this is still in a process. I think in the field, there are a lot of like this or that directions, a bit like black and white. I feel it's not really black and white. I think overall, body work is powerful. And also here with that power comes with responsibility. This is always, I think, the loop. And overall touch can be destabilizing. And it is something what you already shared, a facilitator may not know. Someone has PTSD, or not even just PTSD, someone is just very sensitive and just also don't want to be touched in that way, or the most people also sometimes don't know. And that's something I feel is important to collaborate really very actively with the participants in that way, and really be in exchange, really talk with them about it, what really physical touch mean, also what the negative effects of it can be. Because sometimes we just talk, you want physical touch, we work with this can do this and this in a positive way, but also it can, destabilize. It can maybe give you a feeling like you get in a freeze, or your nervous system just really reacting very intensely on that. And and in the study itself, we work with this like colors, so that people could pick a color. So how and where they want to be touched. They also wrote down where they don't want to be touched. And I think that was something what was really helpful. But I still feel there's always a huge space. And I think we are also not 100% there yet to figure out how we handle that. Because still when you know someone want to be touched and someone wrote down on what place is not, I think we're always still in front of the person. And then if we are a breathwork supporter in this sessions where you go around and you would do the bodywork, you would do the energetical support, or just being the support there. And then you always stand in front of a person and try to tune in. Of course, it's a lot of intuitional work. And I think that's also something what I don't want to minimize, how strong our intuition can be, but your intuition can always still be wrong. And something, how much risk you want to take, what is actually then in the end on the shoulders of the participant maybe. This is also something I feel about is a very thin line. And I mean, to be honest, I go very with my intuition. And for me personally, the interesting thing is that I often have then, when I'm really tuning in and letting all these things, what comes up also in my personal story, when I'm waiting quite a time, then I'm often not having the urge to touch someone in the end. Like this is mostly then my conclusion out of it. And if I'm doing that, for me personally, I start also to ask people. I really to talk with people during the experience. I mean, some people are like, okay, then they get out of their thing. But if I'm really having the urge to touch someone because I think intuitively this could help them, I rather ask for consent, even though the person gives the consent already, because I don't want to, that the person, how is it in English when you get like a shock or like a...
Yeah, because even just on that level, it does and can bring somebody out of their journey. You can be in a particular place and then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, I'm back.
Exactly. Yeah. And for me, it's not an argument to say like, I don't talk with the person because I don't want to take them out of the experience. I feel I more take them out of the risk. It's hard to take them out when I'm not talking to the person. Yes. And I don't have to, of course, I can talk very gently and just say, here, I'm next to you. I would now put my hand on your shoulder. Would you be okay for that? Maybe just nick with your head. And I made actually very positive experience with that, because I felt people felt I'm collaborating with them already when I'm doing that. I'm not just doing and having this power position. I'm more asking, how can I really support you? And this needs to come from the person and not from me, or not from my intuition. So this is just how I see it. And this is the way how we did it actually at the study, or like how I did it in the study. I mean, there were more cohorts, so I can't speak for all of them. And with that, we had really powerful results also for the people, then how positively impactful the touch can be. And that was something then also, they're also, again, speaking from my own story, for me, having touch in the right moment was very transformative. But I have also to say, the touch, what really helped me to let myself held, so because this was a huge topic of my journey, it was not really in the most transformational moments. We're not in the breathwork session. It was more the way how I trained to be held. And then the real transformation happened in my real life, when I could let this situation happen in my daily life with someone I love and I know. And I just then could remember how I did it in a breathwork session, how I could surrender to someone. And then I did it there. And then that was actually the transformational moment. And I think this is also something breathwork sessions can be, this kind of like exploration field to learn how to adapt it into your real
Yeah,
life.
it's real life. Yes.
Yeah, where the real work happens. And I
Yeah.
think there really is the shift gonna happen. And because you trained your nervous system to feel the trust in these moments. So this is why it's so delicate to not overstep boundaries, because if you're in this space, scare someone or someone gets destabilized, you re-traumatize the person and it gets even more insecure. And this is something, what makes breathwork so powerful, because in this space you can actually, trigger the one or the other way. And I think communication is a huge part in really taking time and going very slow and really seeing how much can I do with energy work itself. Because if I see someone is already reacting to energy work a lot, I don't feel the urge to touch someone anyway. And even the energy field, I feel sometimes. Also, this is a very personal space. I think also our energy field is something I don't want to have someone having maybe all the time his hand over my heart. So maybe it's not something I want. And I think we are also just so used to getting our boundaries gets crossed also in a physical and energetical way. So this is also, I think, a lot of people not even speak up when they don't be aligned with any touch or something.
Yes.
Because they don't, it's not a big thing. Maybe it helps, maybe not. Maybe I want to experiment. And so this is also something I observed, that a lot of people actually even don't know where are their boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think this is a huge thing.
And I think that
as
is
well.
the topic in power dynamics again coming into it. And I think it's really healthy, like you say, for more people to enter into that conversation as a facilitator at the start of the session, saying, here's all the reasons you may or may not want to receive this, without going into, like a 30-minute, it could turn into its own discussion in its own right, but to say it's very much okay to not want this, and then to consider that altered state that you're in where you might again want to confirm consent. And I personally would agree as well that energetically there's a tremendous amount going on without having to be close to somebody's body. So it's like there's all those kind of considerations. How do we make this safe, and how do you make it? Because I'm sure you've heard from plenty of people negative experiences from breathwork, which is really unfortunate, when you hear sort of the experience that they had. And generally when you listen to them speak about the session, there's several things which we've already talked about here that are the key reasons why it wasn't a helpful and maybe sometimes quite a damaging session actually. And it'll be the person in the room was not aware of their own energy on that day. So their main concern was, I'm doing this it could be positive in one light, but they're doing it because they've got a sold out studio and it's full. So they've got a room full of people. They're maybe not in the correct energetic space to hold it. And their kind of goal the whole way through the session is push, push, push. So not giving that agency back to the person. Yes. And then also not checking in with boundaries. So somebody's kind of lying in this expectant state of, maybe somebody's going to touch me, maybe somebody's going to not. Do I want this? Do I even know? Am I just doing this experientially, So like I would kind of like say to somebody who's going in, and maybe if you're listening and you're interested in breathwork, you're like, I would like to try a session and see what this is like, is go in saying very much in your own head, I'm going to stay within my own power field here, and like just let it be an experience and see how that feels for you, in the total agency of saying, I'm going to stay in my space, in my energy, and I'm going to breathe and just see what actually what that feels like, without entering in all these other kind of questions into the field. So you're sort of like, do it in a place with people that you trust. And I think people generally do know when they enter into a space. They might ignore, some of the questions that are coming up in their head, but they might be like, this is already kind of like setting off some bells where I don't feel totally comfortable, But I could go on and on about just this topic for the rest of our conversation. I want to ask you so many other questions. But I think
I just
yes.
To add one thing that was really important, I want to give people on the way, because there is like this concept of double consent. And I just wanted to share it because a lot of people don't know about it. And this is something I actually really prefer to work with. And I forgot to mention right now, it's that you ask people in the beginning when they're all lying down, having eyes closed, who wants to be touched, who don't want to be touched. So you remember that, or people have like a color they putting in front of their thing. So already in the first place, okay, who wants to be touched, who not, and where and what. But then on the second consent, it's even all of that, it doesn't give you the permission, because the person is in an altered state of consciousness. So maybe the person change their mind during the session, the person, like you also said, maybe don't even remember, don't even know. Maybe the person forgets, oh, I said yes, but maybe in this moment I don't like to be touched again. I think this is something we can't just fix it in the beginning when people are all before the breathwork, because it's shifting so much. There's so much change, and people need to raise their hand when they want to be touched on top of their consent, what they gave in the beginning.
Yes.
And this is something I had so good experience with, because first I was thinking nobody will raise their hand. I was really sure about it, but that was so different. More people than ever were asking for support. I had never so much people asking for support in a session like in that one. And that was such a beautiful experience, because also the body work and everything changed completely. The body work was much more different than I would have done it, because they told me what they need. They were like, can you sit behind me and put your hands on my shoulders? Or do you have an idea what we can do? So I just came, or actually the angels I had came to the people and really worked with them. And then you could really see, I mean, we needed actually kind of some angels. We were like 4 angels, I think, for like 15 people or something. And they were all the time on people. And that was a really beautiful way, because just the people got the support who were really double consenting it and asking for it. And then they were much more longer in their space, and they had a really beautiful experience together. And we were also feedbacking that afterwards. And this is just what I want to give on the way to experiment with this double consent, because this can be very powerful, but then you also need angels for that.
To be able to provide it. And I think it's again, in that situation, you've given the agency back to the person. So, and then that's where, okay, I get to actually say, this is what I want. And of course it should be like this. Yeah. And I think it's something like, for me versus my first session learning to then like years later, and it's, you learn this kind of all along the path. But I think it's really great to bring in that. And I have in the last kind of year, for ages I didn't do any body work, and then I was like, okay, no, it can be super, super beneficial, but how do you create the safety, really? And again, it always comes down to this question on safety and on how do you change it. So what do you think in the direction of what's required to bring breathwork into, like, from the studies and from everything you're doing, what do you think is the next steps in terms of like bringing it into not just healthcare, but bringing it into organizations like you're doing? So talk like a little bit more about intrinsic human dynamics and what your plans and your goals are at the moment. Do you find more companies receptive and more organizations receptive, like kind of like what is needed for people to understand how powerful it can be to bring, not just because I want you to talk a little, of course, on sound. It would be like remiss to not speak to you about sound, because like you're like frequency queen. So like let's talk about that like as well. But how do you bring in nervous system regulation into organizations?
I think what is important to integrate it into systems in that way. I think it's, first of all, people need to be open to work with their body. And of course, curiosity, because that's also something what I had in a beautiful experience actually in the Justice Department, because I was, to be honest, a bit threatened about the people I was working with in the beginning. I was like, oh my God, I don't know how the people would take it, because they come from a very, very different background, without judgment, like totally, but just all the language and everything can be very different for them. But to be honest, they were so open-minded and so curious about how the nervous system and how the state of the nervous system is actually also shaped by the way, of course, how we get raised as children, but also how our coping mechanisms has to do with that, and also how our relationship dynamics are to do with that, how power dynamics have to do with that, how we can get access to these states, or like get a better observative perspective on that when we do body work and when we do breath work, and that we really can navigate this very reactive behavior or way of working or being actually also mainly in relationship, how we can pause when we do breath work, when we work with the body, when we consciously choose to hold on. And that sounds then just so simple, and also what actually sound can play a role in that to really relax, and how much proper relaxation. I think this is a really big thing. The quality of the relaxation has a lot to do, I think, how we are able to integrate it in the system, and how the willingness to really relax is there. Because I think if we are trying to just achieve more and to get better while integrating breathwork and these body practices, and even being much more better in performance and just focusing on performance all the time, I think we miss the point. And I think this is something what also from the experience I had there, that first, of course, people were like, how can I get better there? How I can make even more work with all these breathwork knowledge and so on. But for me, it's really about how we are open to relax, how we are open to understand ourselves, our nervous system, our coping mechanisms, and do we create spaces to relax, and how can the breath support us in that, and also how can sound support us on that. And I think this is a very important baseline together with curiosity to bring it into the system, and that it's actually about doing less and stepping a bit more back than doing even more or pushing more. And this is the biggest challenge I have felt when I worked with employees or business.
It's just what happens when you don't. Because I'm actually going to read out, because you shared this, and I think this quote is so great. You shared this yesterday. A society that defines success by how much you can consume rather than how connected you are to your own humanity is a society that manufactures its own mental health crises. And I think this is in every organization. One of the key issues is if you stop for a second and just go, okay, we're human beings. Let's be a human being for a second and just like connect and take a breath. And then all of a sudden, it's like you said, the same as why breathwork can be this moment to explore something that you can then bring into your life. It's not about constantly doing like the work and doing fixing or healing. It's not these things. It is like you take a moment to be like, how do I feel in my body right now? And then you're able to go into your next task or next job. And yes, I say, unfortunately, we do have to work because we've created this really weird reality where we all have to work. We could have done this differently. How do you remind everybody of their joy? And then you can go back into that space like much more open. And so talking then about, because obviously sound and frequency and your gongs, I'd love you just to speak about this and how you bring this into the work, because I think all of the things that you do come together so beautifully. And for me, I've definitely, sound and breath are not separate things. Of course, it's like the natural rhythm of everything. So talk about how, or do you always integrate the two? I've been lucky enough to be in a couple of your sessions and your gongs are magic. Just talk a little bit about how you bring this into your work.
Yes, I think sound is still very underestimated, as I want to say in the first place. I think sound is even the step before actively doing anything. So this is why I also think the combination of doing an active breathing technique with a completely passive tool is a very strong combination. Because I think, as my yoga teacher trained me, that also the Shavasana in the end, what actually people are doing on yoga is actually the main idea of yoga. Mm-hmm. So it's more the being and receiving part, and that all the physical part before was because the mind had so difficulties to calm down. And I feel it's similar in that way, that I feel breathwork is a powerful tool for people and for society, and including myself, where we need to learn to listen again and to really calm down. And if we have something to do, it's easy for us to come in a meditative state because we have something to do. We concentrate on our breathing. We have a focus point. And of course, the breath does also its work. Yes, that's the thing where we actively working on. And then we have the passive part. Of course, we have also the passive exhalation. But I think sound is the absolute, king of passivity.
Yes, of receiving.
Receiving, thank you. This word is what I searched. Is the king of, or the queen of receiving. And that's something what for me is important to combine, because especially in the moments when we start to feel, and there is a sound or a music or a vibration that supports this feeling, we can even get more into resonance and more into letting go and more into really just being. And I think music has this power to remind us on that what we actually already forgot. I always see sound as, the remembrance of what we already forgot that we forgot. For me, sound stands actually overall what I'm doing, frequency, sound, vibration, because I think also nature communicates that way, the birds, the animals. And even if we don't hear sounds with our human hearing in words, but we can feel the vibration of something. And I think we also lost the connection, or we forgot that we can feel the vibration of something. I think this is also connected to our intuition and to what we are doing in our lives and all these things. And I could really go deep into the rabbit hole with that, but overall, really saying that sound for me is, even without you making a specific breathing technique, just laying there and listening. You don't even need music, listening to nature. I think this is the most relaxing thing you can actually do on a very simple way, what is so absolutely for your mental health, for your overall health, for your connection. And it's one of the most simple things. And if we forgot how powerful this can be, then of course we forgot that we forgot. And so this is why sound and music is for me such a powerful topic. And I hope and think actually that the future will remember more and more. I have just this feeling that it comes more back into society, and that also the gong made it very far. Of course, that you also then have these movements where people is it maybe sometimes more superficial, sometimes less. I think it's always part when something is coming back, expanding. For me, overall, the expansion is what is important, and that the gong, the sounds, and not just music, what is already is too much information, really just the sound, just the frequency itself. That's what I think is, I think, one of the strongest tools, even though what we can experience as humans.
Absolutely. And it's to connect them back into, like you say, it's already there. It's the sound that's already there. But also adding in to what you're saying is about nature. And I mean, these things are very physiological. If you're somebody who loves science, of course, it's very physiologically proven. Like you can wire somebody up and be like, go lie in that forest there for 2 seconds, or go get in the water and it's, and I think that's one of the really interesting things about, there's so many conversations again on social media where people putting out like, women shouldn't get into cold water and cold plunge, and is this good for you physiologically, and all these sorts of different things where people are doing it for this like performance reason or shock reason. You're like, if you're just getting into the nice ocean, just to, like, enjoy plugging into nature, it's good. Yes, of course, listen to your body. It's maybe not for everybody. Some people do not like the cold, but like, it's like everything's being like analyzed to death, and it's like, just enjoy nature.
Yes, and now you're saying something so important. Thank you for mentioning that, because I think, or what do you think? I think it's something what has to do with seeing sensitivity as something so valuable. Because I think if we get so, or if we develop that we need it to be so numb, that we need a cold plunge to, coming from one intensity to the other, and then we're making just this ping pong thing. And I feel sensitivity is something what gets also so underestimated. And I hope, I actually have really the deep belief with the youth I'm working, and also speaking to all neurodivergent humans out there, that I think this is a superpower what we need in the future more and more, that people, they sense it. And of course, they're much more likely to be overstimulated that fast in the systems we have already built, and where come then all these self-doubt and all these things. But I think we're developing in this, it's really a deep belief and hope, and also, just sense of intuition. But I still believe that this will get more and more a topic. And this is, I think, also why sound in nature will be more integrated in the future for our youth and for the younger teenagers, because I hear them more and more speaking that way. Of course, it can be a bubble. Of course, you have, for sure, many directions in this field, but it's how I perceive it and how I really believe in that sensitivity, sound, nature, really sensing this like very delicate information gets much more and more valuable in the future.
Definitely, especially with the information overload that, the generation coming in now is absolutely like, could there not be any more? So just take all of that away, and you'll hopefully find people more grounded in themselves. I could talk to you lots and lots and lots. So I actually would like to ask you, well, first of all, tell us where people can connect with you, or what project is there anything that you're up to at the moment that you would like to invite people to connect with you on?
Thank you for asking. Yes, there are two things in the pipeline I think I want to focus on. Overall, of course, you can connect with me over LinkedIn with Isabella Stephanie Hauck, with a CK in the end. And also on Instagram with humanneed.life. And that's also actually my website is www.humanneed.life. And I will give a free masterclass on the 1st of August from 10 till 11:30 on a Saturday. And we're talking about relationship dynamics. What's going to be very interesting. We're diving into the NERM model from psychology. And yes, that's one big thing. And then in October, I will start my first cohort with the Intrinsic Human Dynamics practitioner training. It's going to go half in a year.
Nice.
And it's my first cohort. I'm super excited to do that. And sound will be a part of the whole training, actually.
Love it. Is this going to be an online training or in person?
It's an online training, but we will also have some in-person gatherings. I think there will be one in Berlin, maybe one even in Switzerland or Austria. This I have to figure out because I'm still looking for the perfect retreat space. But yeah, I was definitely thinking to not have it all online, to have like maybe 3 or 4 moments, also bringing the group together for the people that are able to do that.
Beautiful.
But the most of the time will be online because I had an really good experience with an online training. So I feel that's also really working well and makes it also kind of like more adjustable for our day-to-day life. But yes, but it's really centered about sound, frequency, and relationship dynamics, actually. That's the core of it.
Perfect. Well, I'll pop all the links for that below. And I mean, I'm sure you're going to find a perfect retreat space because when I watch your stories, it's like, where is she now? Is this Iceland? She's like floating along on a river. It's unreal. It looks so good.
It's to Zurich. That's the water here in Zurich. It's unbelievable how clean the water here is.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
I'm just in the water.
So good, so good. So then we'll finish maybe with this question. If we are, and I'm sure we will, but if we're having a conversation again on here in like 10 years' time, like what do you hope that we're talking about in terms of where we're at? What's the utopia? Because I think it's always best to aim for that.
What's an utopia?
The utopia,
As you
yeah.
mean,
Like what do you want us to be talking about in terms of our work? And obviously both of, you know, from when we both met each other, we're both always sort of in very different places than where we were like a few years ago. So we're, for you, just not for humanity, because that's huge, but for you, where would you like to be? What do you want to be talking about?
So actually, I would love to be in a place. I think I mentioned it already. I think for me, it's really the sound gets much more and more into science-proven concepts and also into systemic concepts, and really what really resonance is, and how we can integrate tools, they shift resistance into resonance, and how this is connected actually to health. I mean, it's also like kind of a big thing, but this is what I would love to talk about in the future, because this is really something where Intrinsic Human Dynamics is working on. And I know this is like a big vision, and I think I will not be alone with this movement, but I hope that more and more people understand how much vibration has to do with our health, and how this is connected to nature, our mental health, and also starting when we're talking about health, not about health in terms of disease, health about energetic, charged, vital human being, you know, like more preventive, more
thriving.
Yes.
Yeah. Beautiful. Oh, I love you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. And of course, I mean, I talk to you all the time, but I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much, darling.
Thank you for your invitation. It was so beautiful. Talk to you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the We Have Breathwork podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I'd love if you could subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who you think might enjoy it too. And if you like, you can connect with me on Instagram at We Have Breathwork. Take care. Bye.